Oh, hello everyone, and welcome to FyreSlayers Battletome review. I know I'm 5 minutes early, 4 minutes early, but that's okay. I need to do some tweaking of the camera. Messed up there, haven't I? Look, there you go. Let's just fix that. Oh, no, mic's in the way. Marvellous. Okay, that should do things. Hi, how you doing? I thought I would start a couple minutes early just for the introduction, really, because I think most people will probably pop along at 11 o'clock and they don't want to hear me waffling on for a couple of minutes. First and foremost, thank you very much, everybody who's joined in the chat so far. That's absolutely brilliant. I just want to make a request. If you're going to ask a question for me to look at, please can you put at the symbol Wargamer Online at the start of your question, and it will flag it up in a nice big yellow box for me so I can actually see where you're asking questions, or as opposed to just chatting to each other in the chat. So that really helps me out and helps move the show on. Right, I've had this book for, let's just there you go, I've had this for a couple of days now. Had a good chance to go through it, and I've built a couple of lists as well. And we're going to be filming a battle report this weekend, possibly two, with two different lists representing two of the different lodges. So what we're going to do is kind of push, I think, the new meta around some of the battle line troops and see how that goes. And then at the same time as well, we're also going to look at a Magma Drop heavy list, if you like. So that's the plan. It's been interesting, shall I say, the review of this book. At first glance, there's a lot has changed. So I think you know, as soon as we get into this book, I will move at a pace. My plan is to spend probably 30 minutes going through the book, dipping in and out of detail. And then the last 30 minutes of the show, so a 60-minute show, the last 30 minutes of the show reviewing questions, jumping back forward, trying to answer any specific questions. Obviously, you know, going through the entire book verbatim, page by page, I'm not going to do that. If you know this channel by now, I don't show everything, but I'm happy to show some content. I want to talk about some of the biggest stuff to start with. That I've not seen so far on some of the reviews. So let's start some broad brush stuff. Let's talk about points values, not specifically in each unit, we'll come to that shortly, but I want to talk about how the army has been impacted, if you like, across the whole. One of the things I did was to price up my entire collection, if you like, contained within this book. And you know, considering I've got somewhere in the region of, you know, Runefather, 2 Rune Smiters, 4 Rune Sons, all on Magma Drops, a whole bunch of Runefathers, Rune Sons, Smiters on foot. Every single unit represented: Half Guards, Auric Half Guards, Chosen Axes, Volkite Berserkers, Doomseekers, Battlesmiths. It's all in there basically as a full list. And my entire collection, if I was to have stuck it on the table, previous edition would have been 4,540 points. In the new edition, going through and calculating the points, that has jumped 950 points, so it's now 5,490 points. I think it's worth mentioning that as I worked through the book, and I sort of sat alongside Jack and we were working through the book and saying, you know, what I really like about it, let's start with what I really like about it from an overall point of view, is it feels far more balanced and you will see more units on the table. I think when I got to the end of it, I was surprised to see some of the point hikes, if you like. Some of it makes sense, some of it doesn't. You know, there's a 2 wound mechanic versus the ignore wound mechanic, and I think statistically they work out pretty much on par with each other, and because of that, you know, bear in mind that that save now can be rendered, whereas the ignore couldn't be rendered, of course. You know, I expected points to not really move much, but what we've seen, you know, across the army is an average of a 20% increase on point value. That's, you know, across that's how much my army has gone up. You know, like I say, that's based on, you know, 4,500 points worth of painted models, basically. So we'll see is in terms of my interpretation of the Battletome. And I'm reserving judgment because I think this is going to be one of those Battletomes that needs quite a bit of playing. Because what we've got now is a lot of the rules have moved away from unit ability and have moved into mechanics like prayers and stuff like that. So they're not always applied, and they're only applicable in certain circumstances. You have, you know, area effects and bubbles where you can grant these prayers. So you are tactically going to have to work a little bit harder on unit placement. Definitely, it feels like a lot of the stuff has got smaller. So you know, the Rune Smiter's abilities, Runic Empowerment, for instance, is contracted in range. And you used to, you know, you give your Rune Smiter a key and you could be quite lazy with that 20-inch bubble. You know, you're pretty much going to be okay. And what we've seen is, of course, Holy Within has crept into the language, of course. And by the way, I'm fully behind that idea. So I think we're going to have to play FyreSlayers completely differently. And therefore, it's hard for me to kind of go through this Battletome. Is it great? Are they going to be top tier in terms of competitive play, or are they going to lose out against some of the Deathless, you know, Nighthaunt, etc., or Skaven in terms of heavy shooting? Right now, it's hard for me to gauge, and the best way to do that is to start playing some games, which I'm going to do. What I am going to say, though, is what I really, really, really like about the Battletome is I think it's far more balanced in terms of encouraging you to bring a broader range of units to the table. So I actually think they're going to be more enjoyable to play, particularly, you know, forget points for a minute, take yourself into open play and narrative play. They're going to be a very interesting army to play, and I'm excited by that. I'm just reserving judgment on where they sit competitively. 2 wounds is massive, but statistically I think it's in a similar place to you know, to where the ignore wound mechanic was in place. And of course we're now, you know, more prone, if you like, as FyreSlayer players to mortal wounds, I would say. That being said, I am going to get into this book. I have gone for like 5 minutes as an introduction, and what I'm going to do is jump into the book. What I've been working on is I've been getting my Magma Drops ready for this, and as you can see, I've not quite got the Rune Fathers and the Rune Smiters to go on the back of these yet. They are in production, so a whole bunch of guys still with base coats on, unfortunately. But I will get there. I'm going to move those out of the way. Let's get into the book and have a quick chat about it. As ever, incredible artwork. You've seen the stuff on the community already. The artwork is looking absolutely fantastic. It's a great looking book. What have we got in terms of content? We've got stuff on the Magma Holds, Born to Flame, which is talking a little bit about the houses. We've got the Soul Walls background, which is like a double page spread, just bringing the lore up to date on how Soul Wars has affected FyreSlayers, a little bit about how they fight and how they work, and then we're into Allegiance abilities, Path to Glory, War Scrolls. Before I go too far into this, what I want to, you know, some of the bits I want to pick out from the fluff, I think. In fact, the main thing I want to focus on, because, you know, there has been an update to the background of the army, and I really like the role Magma Drops is playing, but it's been featured on the community page, so there's no need to get too much into it. The updated lore, if you like, around the Soul Wars and how it's impacted, it's quite interesting. You know, this whole page here is very much standard content. You know, talks about the Necroquake and you know, how that gets into it. The second page is really how it affected, if you like, the FyreSlayers. What's really interesting is the FyreSlayers actually fared quite badly, I think, in the Soul Wars. You know, it was said on the community site that, you know, they would have a role to play, if you like, in Soul Wars. They really weren't ready. Their you know, 2-mile thick walls in mountain ranges were no good against spirit hosts, basically, who appeared. You know, entire lodges fell, entire magma holds fell to this. There's a really interesting bit in this story here that talks about the only way one of the lodges, the Vardraz lodge, sorry, actually that fell, so it's another one, I think, somewhere in here. The only way one of the other lodges actually survived was basically using all of their gold, all of their air gold, to power the berserkers into such a rage that essentially when the battle was over, they all died. You know, they just burnt themselves out. Their hearts had burst. interesting stuff. You know, this was very, very dark times for the FyreSlayers, and you know, there's a hint at the end, I think, where it brings both the sort of Shiashian magic, you know, is still quite crucial against them, and then on top of that as well, what we've got is, you know, Nagash appears to be draining power from Urgold. That's interesting. So the only way they can save the power from being drained is, you know, hammering it into their skin and you know, going to war, basically. So they're burning it up anyway, but at least it stops it from being drained. And then, you know, a last little hint there in the last bit of the fluff, of course, along all of this, the Bad Moon Rises. So, you know, you've got them being tied into both the Bad Moon Rising and what's going off in the Soul Wars. How that develops in terms of narrative, or what we'll see, or whether we'll see stuff in the new coming expansion to Soul Wars, who knows? Who knows? We'll see whether the role they play is anything beyond just having a place within the Soul Wars, as defined by essentially, you know, having a pretty tough time of it. Just going to jump on. What I want to do is to get quickly into the rules, because there's a lot. So I don't think I'm going to cover the fluff much more. There's a lot of stuff in here in terms of painting guides. You know, we do see the new lodges. We've got Vostarg, Greyfired, Hermdar, Lofnir. That's what the focal point is all around these four. You do get information on all of the rest. Lofnir being the heavy Magma Drop base, Vostarg being sort of the standard. You know, this, as you would, I think the standard FyreSlayers, for want of a better word, the Ultramarines of FyreSlayers. And then if you get into Greyfired, these are a little bit more secretive and a little bit more sneaky. Sorry, that's actually the Hermdar. They're a little bit more secret. So yeah, interesting stuff, and we'll come on to the lodges and the lodge rules. I'm going to do that quite quickly, so forgive me. Like I say, we've got a lot to cover, so let's get into this. Let's talk a little bit about how the mechanic has changed quite significantly. As I said, most of the abilities were attached to units. You did have abilities to heroes, you know, that being Runic Empowerment from Smiters, etc., the Battlesmith having a role. There were these bubble effects that were relevant to the game, but what you've got now, I think, is there was also a layer, if you like, of abilities that have been reduced in some way, and the prayers are the way you now boost the army, along with a few other things. Battle traits, you know, quick look at battle traits. What we're seeing straight away is essentially either not much of a change, or essentially a reduction, if you like, of the ability. So Rune of Fury, rerolling hits of 1 is the standard one. Enhanced is add 1 to the attack characteristics. No real shift there. Rune of Searing Heat, you know, on a roll of for an attack made by a friendly unit is a 6. This is a wound roll. You add 1 to the damage. The enhanced effect is you roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inch of a friendly FyreSlayer. On a 2-up, it suffers 1 mortal wound, so D3 is being dropped to 1 mortal wound, and you roll up to make it have an effect on a 2-up. Rune of Awakening Steel, which is the improved Ren mechanic, hasn't changed. You can do it by 1 or 2 based on whether you get the enhanced. Fiery Determination. This to me was a biggie. I'm going to turn off my compressor. Right. And I'm back. Sorry about that. I knew my compressor was going to come on. So Rune of Fiery Determination, sorry about that. Add 1 to the bravery characteristics of units. Enhanced effect is do not take battle shock. So that's been stepped down a notch. It used to be battle shock, and then I think fight after combat, wasn't it? A fight after death in combat. So big impact. Obviously the mechanic of fighting after death has moved, so I kind of get it, I understand it. +1 bravery. You know, the 2 wounds I think is going to counter that, because you're not removing as many models. So we'll see. But, you know, for want of a better word, a little bit of a nerf there. Relentless Zeal, big impact if you like. It's now only moving it 2 rather than, so you get a 2-inch move rather than a 4-inch additional move. And charges have only been upgraded by 2. Charging I want to talk about. There's quite a few mechanics to affect charge. but on the whole, I think there is some risk now around magmic tunneling. I think you'll use that with caution. Rune of Farsight is, as you've seen on the community site, adding 1 to hit rolls for attacks, and adding 1, enhanced is adding 1 to wound. And again, you will have seen on the community site, most of the throwing axes have actually been taken to 5s and 5s. So the reality is the Rune of Farsight just brings it back essentially to what you were used to for 1 turn. After that, there's been a big reduction, if you like, of the impact of the throwing axes. Lodges, we cover the 4 main ones: Vostarg, Greyfired, Hermdar, Lofnir, and we'll definitely come to that. I want to have a look at, I think, some of the command traits which are really interesting, and I might jump forwards and back a little bit on this, because let's just pick 1 or 2 of each area and then let's go into questions as well. But and I'll pick some stuff out how I think the new meta has shifted, if you like, around how you make your Rune Father on Magma Drops, more powerful than he was by a long way. Some of the things I'm going to pick out: Spirit of Grimnir. So this is a Rune Father and Rune Son only inheritance command trait. So this is, if the general's on the battlefield, you can roll to activate your Ergo Rune, the enhanced effect, on a roll of 5 instead of 6. So that's not once per battle, it's just throughout the entire game you are going for enhanced on a 5 up. To me, that's good. The only problem is actually there's some other stuff that's really good, and I'm kind of thinking, do I want the enhanced roll? Or do I want to do, for instance, add 1 to the damage characteristics of the general's melee weapons? You put a Rune Father on a Magma Drop and stick 1 damage across all of those weapons. That's pretty interesting. The axe is coming in at 4 damage now. There are ways of giving him extra attacks. Adding 1 to the save roll if your target's the general. This is moving the Magma Drop from 4 to 3. And again, there are other ways of you can get your Rune Father to a 3-up save, re-rolling 1s. So in its own, quite interesting. Magmic Empowerment, which is essentially command traits aimed at Rune Smiters and Rune Masters. A couple of interesting ones: Oathsayer, add 1 to the bravery characteristic of friendly Dwarden units while they're wholly within 18 inches of this general. So Dwarden, great. Very interesting that you've got a command trait that can, help allies as well, if you're ally in Dwarden in there. Master Priest, once per battle at the start of your hero phase, if this general is on the battlefield, you can activate 1 Urgold rune that has already been activated instead of 1 that has not yet been activated, so giving you the option to use 1 twice. I like that. I think that's great. We've got some heirlooms, so artifacts of power, some nice stuff in here. Big one for me, Axe of Grimnir. You can re-roll hit rolls for attacks made by the bearer. I really like that, because again, you give the Rune Father the Axe of Grimnir, you are re-rolling attack rolls made by the bearer. So if that Rune Father's on the Magma Drop, there's no statement about whether he is or isn't on the Magma Drop. It's simply aimed at Auric Rune Fathers and Auric Rune Sons. That means you are re-rolling hits, and given that the Rune Father hasn't really shifted in terms of statistics, it's 3s and 3s now to hit and wound with the Latchkey Axe, the Grand Latchkey Hatch, and it's 3 damage. Re-rolling hits is cool. Then if you've got +1 damage on that as well, really interesting stuff. Right, where are we? Artifacts of Raf and Doom. So this is interesting, because now we have some artifacts directly aimed at Grimwrath Berserkers, and this is what I'm talking about. I think the game has shifted to where you have to think a little bit more on the build list, because a lot of this stuff is not included default within the stat card. So for instance, Beast Slayer, pick 1 of the bearer's melee weapons. If the hit roll for an attack made with that weapon is the target's a monster and scores a hit, that attack inflicts 2 hits on the target instead of 1. Make a wound roll and a save roll for each hit. That's huge for the Grimwrath Berserker, I think. That's massive. So really interesting stuff. Particularly when we come on shortly to Half-Guard Berserkers, and really Half-Guard Berserkers are the only unit that has retained the ignore wound mechanic as it was, and again, you can get to the point where you add 2 to that if there's a hero there, basically. so you can be back up to a 4 ignore. Grimwrath Berserker looks a really interesting dude to put in the middle of Half-Guard Berserkers. Let's have a quick look at some of the remaining stuff. We have artifacts for Rune Masters and Rune Smiters. Some really nice stuff in here. I love the Droff Helm. This is you can reroll hit rolls for attacks made for claws and horns of friendly Magma Drops within 6 inch of the bearer. So you put a Rune Smiter on a Magma Drop with Rune Suns either side of him, and you're re-rolling hits made with horns and claws. Huge, huge, interesting stuff. Icons of Grimnir, this is for battlesmiths only, so a bit like the Grimwrath Berserkers. Bearer can attempt to unbind one spell in the enemy hero phase in the same manner as a wizard, but get this, I really like it. In addition, if the bearer unbinds a spell, roll a dice on a 2-up. The caster suffers 1 mortal wound. So I love the fact that, you know, we're seeing this kind of moving back towards, you know, being able to genuinely do something to shut magic down. And there are more mechanics within the game to do that besides that one. And on top of that as well, the fact that you're going to think a little bit twice. No range. No range is mentioned, but it says as if you're a wizard. So the unbinding is limited to... I think it's 18 inch. Correct me if I'm wrong on the... I don't use a lot of wizards. I don't know whether it's 18 inch or 24, but I'm sure someone will be happy to pop that one in the chat for me. Magma Drop traits, very interesting. I think the most important thing really to think about Magma Drop traits is you can only use 1 Magma Drop trait. But there's a catch. If you are going to take the... I want to say Fafnir, but that's not what they're called. And it's already slipped out. Lofnir. If you take Lofnir, then you can give a Magma Drop trait to every Magma Drop in your army. And when let's just stack some of these up then, because this is really interesting. You can also take 5 Magma Drops. So 5 Magma Drops, all with their own mount trait. Let's just have a quick look at some of this stuff, because what we've got, for instance, is worsen the rend characteristics of melee weapons that target this model by 1. Okay, reroll saves of 1 for attacks that target this model and friendly Magma Drops within 6 inch. So now if you stack 3 Magma Drops side by side, they're all getting reroll saves of 1 from 1 mount ability. Then you can start to stack up some other stuff on top of that. After this model has made a charge, pick 1 enemy unit within 1 inch of this model and roll the number of dice equal to the charge roll of that charge route. Each 6, the unit suffers 1 mortal wound, so you take those 3 guys in. You know, you don't get any benefit from being side by side, but the point is if you take all 3 of them into a combat, that unit's suffering mortal wounds before you get anywhere. We've got Fireclaw Adult. If unmodified roll for an attack made with this mount melee weapon is 6, then the attack has a rend characteristic of -3. Oh, yeah. So I like the fact that you can stack all of these up and, you know, make it quite powerful, if you almost treat them as a uber powerful unit. And then there's that one little Ashhorn Ancient in there that I think is giving everybody that reroll saves of 1. And when you've got a 4-up save, rerolling 1s is pretty important. You know, and as I've said, there are ways, for instance, if you give that trait in particular to, say, your Rune Smiter, who is, you know, also taking, say, the Droff Helm, re-rolling hits of attacks and horns and claws for friendly Magma Drops within 6 inch of the bearer. So now you've got 3 Magma Drops, potentially 4 if you wanted to go that far, all re-rolling saves of 1 and all re-rolling hits using horns and claws. And then one of those could have that, you know, improve of rend for horns and claws. So, yeah, wow. Just really, really interesting. I really like the look of that mechanic, and there's a lot of fun to be had with that. David Ellis has just commented it's 30 inch to unbind, so actually that's a much bigger bubble than I remember. But like I say, I don't use wizards that often. I really should, because I also play Sylvaneth, so... yeah, okay. Anyway, no more excuse beyond that. Let's have a look at the prayers. The prayers, there's 2 types of prayers. Let's get that out of the way before we start. Some of the units have prayers as an ability. So, for instance, the Rune Smiter has a prayer. That prayer is, let me have a quick look at this. Jumping backwards and forwards. How are we doing for time? I think we're okay. So bear with me, please. Sorry about this. if I go for the Rune Smiter, the so Runic Empowerment is now a prayer. Sorry, you know what? I thought it was, but I wanted to double check before I said something stupid. So on a 1 or 2, Runic Empowerment isn't going off now, so it's not guaranteed every turn. On a 3+, the prayer is answered. If it's answered, you pick a unit wholly within 12 inch of the model, or wholly within 18 inch if you've got the key. You can re-roll wound rolls for attacks made by that unit until the start of your next hero phase. So bubble's been tightened down a little bit, not huge. You know, I think it was it 10 and 20, I think. So the standard one's grown, and the enlarged bubble has shrunk a little bit, and it's wholly within as well. So you know, bear that in mind. But not only can they have that prayer, the Runic Empowerment, you can pick one of the Zargrim Blessings, basically. And the Zargrim Blessings, there's some interesting points to say. Each priest in an army knows one blessing from the list. There are abilities to be able to give your priest 2 blessings. You can choose to roll for a prayer, or, you know, you can select one. Everybody's going to select one, let's face it. You know, quickly coming into what some of these can do then. Molten Infusion, 1 friendly model that can chant it. It goes off on a 3+. If the prayer is answered, you pick a Magmic Invocation within 12 inch of the priest at the end of the battle round. Do not make Temporal Nature roll for that invocation. What am I talking about there? Well, these are the endless spells, which aren't quite endless. They have temporal natures. In other words, they can disappear. You know, they can just fizzle away. So you can switch that off. If you really want one of those invocations to remain around for another turn, you've got a prayer that on a 3+ enables you to do that. I'm going to jump to say Grimnir's Fury. So this goes off on a 3+. You can pick a hero that's not mounted on a Magma Drop within 3 inch of an enemy unit, and within 12 inch of the priest. So, you know, this is what I was saying. You've got to work this. Make a piling move with that arrow, and then attack with all melee weapons the hero is armed with. So you're just straight in there in the hero phase, getting a full round of attacks before you then go into combat. And, you know, I've not really covered this yet, but there are mechanics to get multiple attacks anyway within the army. Interesting stuff. So the prayers are interesting. You can only you know, you can chant multiples, which is good. So, you know, you carry 2 of them around as standard. There are ways of carrying 3 prayers, you know, through abilities. But it's all going to be about making sure you've got enough of those characters, enough of those prayers, and thinking about how they apply to what you're trying to do. The kind of things I found interesting, for instance, you can pick an enemy. One of them is pick an enemy unit and take 1 to hit. So if you're on the Lofnir and you're taking that big heavy Magma Drop unit in, and it's all buffing itself and each other and going in, one of the things you can do is, you know, with the prayer, is the unit you're about to hit, you can just put them on -1 to hit. You know, it just instantly -1 to hit in Sigmar on a D6 game, I think, is pretty significant. I've always been dismissive of it until I've seen it at play, and it really messes you up. And by the time you get to -2 to hit when you're up against death, then you know how painful that is. Prayer of Ash, really, really interesting on a 4+. Friendly unit within 18 inch of the priest. Add 1 to the save rolls for attacks that target the unit until the start of your next hero phase. So again, this is that Rune Smiter now on a Magma Drop, who's already going in at 3+, re-rolling 1s. You can make him 2+, re-rolling 1s, you know, just by putting the right prayer in place. So, wow, you know, and already going 3+ because of one of the other things that you can give him, one of the abilities. Where was I? Magmic Invocations is next, and Temporal Nature. Let's talk about Temporal Nature for a bit, because I think the community site has already posted what those 3 invocations are. Personally, I think 2 of them are great, 1 of them not so. We'll cover that a little bit. Temporal Nature is basically you have to roll a dice at when is this done? At the end of each battle round. Sorry about that. So at the end of each battle round, you roll a dice. You add 1 to the roll if there is a friendly priest within 6 inch. On a 1 to 3, it's simply removed from battle. So it's on a 1 and 2, it's removed from battle. In other words, you've got a 50 to a 33% chance that these things are disappearing every turn. It's not the end of the world, because it's the end of the battle round, and it'd be nice if it carries over into your opponent's turn if they're going first. It's not the end of the world, you can bring them back next time. It's not too challenging to bring them to the table, but they're not 100% reliable. You know, these things shouldn't be, should they? I mean, given that some of them do pack quite a punch. Magmic Battleforge, there's a nice bit in the fluff around, you know, every FyreSlayer community is all centered around this, around these central forges. I love how these things appear on the table. Essentially, they're invoked onto the table. This is why you place them after deployment. It's quite a cool idea that, you know, he throws some super powerful runes down, starts chanting, the earth cracks open, and this thing literally teleports out of their stronghold and appears in the middle of the table. So for all those people saying, how do they carry that thing around? They don't. They simply summon it to the battle table using quite clearly, you know, the power of a broken god and a broken god beast. So let's not underestimate what the power of Urgol can do. At the start of your hero phase, this is the nice thing. You've got your friendly priest within 6 inches of the battlefield can control its energy. If you do so, you are adding 1 to prayer rolls. Awesome. Great. For any priest that's within 18 inches as well. So, you know, place that nice and central, or place it close to some pretty important key objectives. And be, you know, not guaranteeing, but really improving the chance of those prayers going off. Those prayers that are going off on the 3-up are now going off on the 2-up. Fantastic. You know, it goes without saying those on the 4-up are going off on the 3-up, but we all know a 50% chance to a 66% chance is a big hike. I'll take a 3-up every day over a 4-up. So, you know, this doesn't sound too much to do, and you know, all you need is a guy within 6 inches of it, and if it's fairly well positioned and it blocks line of sight because it's a nice big fat piece of terrain, yeah, I mean, I'm getting one of these and I'll be all over it with a lighting kit. I want mine like glowing and spitting fire out the top and everything. So I should mention you can burn its energy up, so that almost like the runes themselves. You've got the standard effect, which takes place throughout the whole battle, or you can just spend the forge. In other words, blow all of its power once per battle at the start of hero phase. All the usual restrictions in terms of where the priests need to be. And essentially what you can do is just use all of its power up, and until the start of your next hero phase, you can reroll saves of 1 for friendly FyreSlayer units on the battlefield. Then it's dead. Basically, it doesn't do anything other than sit there as a piece of terrain. Like it. Let's talk a little bit about the lodges. As I said, they give 4 of them most of the attention. This is Fostarg, Greyfired, and over in here, Hermdart, Lofnir. Immediately, this is what it was all about for me. I was pretty excited by these guys. We've got adding 1 to charge rolls. We've got guaranteed 6-inch run roll inside the first turn. You know, this is helping with the mobility, if you like. I really liked it. That paired with friendly Vostok units wholly within 12 inch of the commander can you know, move, run, and still charge. So you do that. It's a new mechanic for getting that turn 1 charge in, really. You know, and like I say, I do think, and I'll come on to this, I do think that the Magmic tunneling has taken, you know, quite a blow. I don't think you'll see it as prevalent as before, which I'm okay with. You know, we were all looking for some new way to play the army, so I don't mind that some of the old mainstays of the army have gone away, basically. Right, where were we? Yes, command abilities. You can, for instance, until the end of the phase, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by the hero and friendly unit, Volkite Berserkers, Half-Guard Berserkers, wholly within 12 inch. That's pretty huge. That's pretty impressive. Let's jump over to Greyfired. At first, wasn't impressed. got more and more excited about it when you look into it. You can choose 2 additional heroes from the army to have an artifact of power. There is some nice stuff in that artifact of power, and you know, obviously other options available to you. The command ability is in a combat phase, when a friendly Greyfired hero is picked to fight, other Greyfired heroes that are not mounted on Magma Drop and are within 3 inches of the hero can immediately fight afterwards, before your opponent gets the option to pick a unit to fight. Any model that does so cannot fight again in the combat, but basically you're putting your heroes to the front. Starts to make a lot of sense when you base that around Doom Seekers and Grimwrath Berserkers. You know, you put 2 Doom Seekers and the Grimwrath Berserker, and the unit of 10 Half-Guard would probably be quite meaty. 15 Half-Guard Berserkers, 20 Half-Guard Berserkers, we'll come on to that. So we'll talk a little bit about points before the end of the show. Right, Hermdar, to me, was the one that immediately I didn't really, you know, spend a lot of time on this. They don't take battle shot tests if they're 12 inch of an objective. That's actually quite strong. A lot of Age of Sigmar games can be won by simply outliving your opponent on an objective. So, you know, it's not a bad thing at all. You know, especially when you're into those, you know, the 6 objectives on a table. Right, command traits, some interesting stuff. Subtract 1 from wound walls of attacks that target this general, so it's not bad. Artifact of power, pick one of the bearer's melee weapons. You can reroll wound attacks that made with this weapon that target heroes. In addition, an unmodified hit roll for the attack made with that weapon that targets an enemy hero is 6. The attack inflicts a mortal wound on top. Like I say, for me, that was the meh one. I was like, you know, it's kind of nice. You can stick around on the table. Less excited about it. Lofnir is the good one. It is the fun one for me because I want to take Magma Drops to the table. I played Magma Drops even when they were utterly pointless to play. For me, this makes it very exciting. Each Magma Drop in a Lofnir army, instead of only 1, can be given a Magma Drop trait. We've talked about this at length. In addition, if you're in a pitch battle, you can include 1 additional Behemoth. So this is 5 Magma Drops, more than doable within a 2,000 point army, and still having a relatively decent amount of support around it. Much less than we would have had in the past, but a lot of wounds on the table when you look at that old wound count. The command ability, in your shooting phase, you pick an enemy unit within 12 inch of a priest. Until the end of that phase, add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with magma pikes by friendly units. I think that's pretty huge. So this is definitely seen as Magma Drop and gun lines. You know, I think that's what I'm seeing Lofnir as, really. Less much, you know, because you've got a command ability that directly has relevance there. You can add 1 to charge rolls for Lofnir Magma Drops within 12 inch of the general. The general's got to be on the Magma Drop. You've got to do that. You've got to layer that general up with all sorts of stuff, whether you take the priest or the Runefather, depending on whether you want to turn Half-Guard into battle line or not. And that's an important point. I've talked about the priest being your general for some of that stuff, but if you want Half-Guard Berserkers as battle line, then you are going to need to take the Runefather as your general. It doesn't stop you putting Runefather on foot and sitting to one side and doing it, but it does stop you, whatever you do, it stops you doing that whole, some of the stuff I talked about with the priest. By the way, I think you can properly charge up a Runefather now. I'm looking forward to seeing a Runefather fully pumped up on Urgold. I'm very excited to be living life of a dwarf. Artifact of power, we've got this Igneous Battle Throne. Roll a dice each time you allocate a wound or mortal wound to the bearer. On a 6-up, the wound is ignored. So again, this has to be given to the first Lofnir hero to receive an artifact. So, you know, an ignore on your general, the Runefather. I've always sort of criticised the Runefather of suffering with that. I like it. I think there's somewhere in here as well that, and I can't remember where I've seen it now, so forgive me for this. I know there's something somewhere where you can add 2 wounds. So it's Greyfired. So, okay, not compatible, but Greyfired, you can have 2 to the wound characteristics of the bearer. Worth considering, though, because, as we'll talk about it in a bit, that makes Magma Drops moving from 12 to 14, which they are now. So they've moved up to 14, giving another 2. You've now got a 16 wound Runefather on a Magma Drop, all pumped up. I'm going to skip the Path to Glory stuff. I think it's pretty good, but I think at 35 minutes into the show, there's a lot of people out there who are probably wanting to know a little bit more about things like, I don't know, battalions. Let's do a quick look at battalions. Right, we have the Grand Fired, we have Lords of the Lodge, Warrior Kimban, Thorge Brethren. Grand Fired, of course, is this big colossal one. It's lost the kind of fluff mechanic of, you know, swearing and oath and those kind of things. That's no bad thing, to be honest. Fun as they are, but no bad thing. You know, every time you roll for an Urgold rune, it's going off on a 5 rather than 6. So, you know, can you get to the point where you've got 1 Lords of the Lodge, 2 Warrior Kimbads, 1 Forge Brethren, and the Doomseeker? Well, okay, the Doomseekers are optional, but let's have a look at Lords of the Lodge. For me, that was a really interesting one. We have an Auric Rune Father, 1 Auric Rune Master, 1 Battlesmith, and 1 unit of Half-Guard Berserkers. That's an utterly easily achieved battalion. Within the list. You are going to want a Rune Master. Well, Rune Masters and Battlesmiths, you're going to want heroes on the table, particularly because that's the remaining boon to the Half-Guard Berserkers. So you're going to stick a Battlesmith in the middle of a unit of Half-Guard Berserkers anyway. What's good about this, the Half-Guard Berserkers from this battalion, wholly within 12 inch of a hero from the same battalion, at the start of combat phase, then after the unit, so you've got to be within 12 inches at the start of the combat phase, and after the unit has fought in that phase for the first time, when it's your turn to pick a unit to fight in later in the same phase, it can be selected to fight a second time. I've read all of that out because there's some mechanics that enable you to fight twice and fight immediately. No, you have to select it as if you're selecting your unit. That's worth making a note of because it changes how you do it. But the point is, really easy to achieve that for all intents and purposes. Auric Runeson, 3 units of Volkite Berserkers, less easy to achieve, and that's because of the climb in price now on Volkite Berserkers. They've gone from, what, 120 points for 10, I think they were. I think they were 120. I don't think they were 100 anymore. They are now 160, and you do not get a bonus for taking 30 of them anymore. So you're paying the full price all the way through. So, not without its challenges. You are definitely having to build around that Warrior Kimban if that's what you're going to take when you take Volkite Berserkers. What do you get? You can use the Berserk Fury ability for 1 Berserker unit from this battalion twice. What am I talking about when I'm talking about the Berserk Fury? You've probably seen it by now. This is a once per battle, once per game ability to you know, fight after you've been removed as a casualty, basically. Or is it fight twice? What am I doing? Let me actually get the wording up so I don't mess this up, because I've read so many of these rules in short order. I think it's pile in and fight again, isn't it? Well, of course it is. Why am I even saying anything other than that? Once per battle at the start of combat phase, you can choose to unleash the Berserk Fury. If you do so at the end of that phase, a model from this unit is slain. Oh, sorry, so it is fighting after you're slain. I should have gone with my gut on that one. Can't believe it. Right, okay, what else have we got in here? We've got the Thorge Brethren, which is 1 Auric Rune Smiter, 3 units of Auric Half-Guard. This is where we're pushing back to this. Start of an enemy hero phase, pick 1 friendly unit wholly within 18 inch of the Half-Guard from the battalion. If you do so, add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target that unit until the next phase. You know, okay. Right. Let's talk about some of the changes. Let's talk about some of the battle scrolls. What I'm going to do is just quickly check on the chat to see what people are saying, and I'm going to immediately try and pick out the at Wargamer Online stuff. Do you see some interesting synergies with allying with Caradron Overlords? To be honest, like I say, the only thing I've actually seen right now in terms of that is that ability to kind of boost the Dward and keyword. I haven't seen anything outside of that, and I don't really know Caradron Overlords enough to see, you know, okay, can they add a complement to this? Yeah, you like range now. That's probably a good way of saying it. A lot of things have been hit on range. So, for instance, Roaring Firestream is down to 12 inch. Axes have to stay at 8 inch now, and they only hit on 5s and wounds on 5s. And that's including all of the characters now. So nobody is better with an axe. Everybody is 5s and 5s when they're throwing their axes, whether you're a Runefather or a Volkite Berserker. So I think range is a real issue for this army. It was never what they were about anyway, and it always felt a little bit strange that you were doing so much damage with these little throwing axes. In last week's chat, we made a comment at 5s and 5s. It almost feels like it's throwing a lot of dice to achieve nothing. So, you know, it's going to slow the game down. But, you know, you're still going to pick 1 or 2 wounds off. Let's not ignore that. When you're in combat and you get something in shooting as well, I'll take it. Even if it's 5s and 5s, I'll take it. So yes, if there's a synergy, the synergy is around range. Right, what else have we got here? Sorry about this, I'm trying to catch up with the chat. Oh, Patrick's in. Hey Patrick, how you doing? Carl, CM is in there, Carl, Martin Dix is in, Dark Prince is in, Mr. Brooks, Mark, Theophil TV, and Ethan McDonald. So hello for joining me in the chat and making comments. David Ellis is in there as well. So what is that? Let's just try and get those chats. Like I say, please put at Wargamer Online at the start. It helps me pick them out. Oh, I work nights. No, that's not a question. Sigh. Morbidity. Do you see... No, we've got that one. Don't forget, command traits never affect mounts unless they're specifically mentioned. Good point. Thank you very much, David. Sorry. So it doesn't... I think I gave an example where you would be adding 1 to the damage of all of them. No, it would not affect the mount. So sorry. Good point. But even so, that's not a bad command trait for your Runefather. The 3s at 3 attacks with the Grand Latch Key is now hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s. It's a -1 rend with 3 damage. There are various ways you can make that 4 attacks rather than 3. That's important. Statistically, you are moving from... I think there's a 27% chance, I can't remember the math hammer now, 20-odd% chance of not doing any damage whatsoever. A high 20, I think it's, you know, with 3 attacks on 3s to hit, 3s to wound, and a -1 rend. And that's calculating it on, you know, probably resulting in a 5-up save. You know, -1, you get a lot of 4-ups being pushed to 5-up. So there's a good chance you'll do no damage with that weapon. Certainly 20, 26, 27% chance of doing no damage. And the biggest chance, 30-odd, 30, almost 40% chance of doing just 3 damage out of that guy. Now, I know you've got the Horns and Claws going off, but just adding 1 attack, making that from 3 to 4 attacks, big push on the stats. It's like a 16% chance of doing no damage, a much higher percentage chance of doing 3, and most importantly, an improved chance of doing 6 damage. And I think it's that 6 damage you really want out of that. And that's before we go into those mechanics that you can do about re-rolling wounds and re-rolling hits. And I think they need to be in there for that latch key to be any good whatsoever. While I'm on the latch key, I am going to mention a couple of things. Weapon Breaker has changed now, so it's now a roll at the end of combat phase. You pick an enemy hero within 3 inches of the model and roll a dice. And on a 6, pick 1 of the melee weapons the model is armed with, subtract 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with that weapon for the rest of the battle. No more having to remember you've rolled a 6, and if you've rolled a 6, you get a chance to break the... Oh man, it never went off. I don't think in the history of me playing FyreSlayers, it never went off. And probably because I forgot to roll it at least 50% of the time. This, at least, you get to the end of the combat phase, which is cool because there's a lot going off on Magma Drops at the end of the combat phase anyway. You know, you've got the Lashing Tail, you've got the Volcanic Blood. Oh, well, we'll come back to Volcanic Blood. You know, you've got stuff going off, so hopefully you'll remember to go for the Weapon Break as well. Right, couple of questions coming in, so let's pick those up before we go too far. 160 points for Volkites. Did anything get any cheaper? Give me a second. No. Everything has gone up except for the Rune Sun on Magma Drop, the Runefather on foot, the Rune Smiter on foot. Yeah, everything else has gone up. Okay. Whew. Do with what you want with that news. Nathan Thomas says, is it just the 4 battalions or is there more for us to look at when the book drops? War Scroll battalions, that's it. It's those 4. You have Grand Fired, Lords of the Lodge, Warrior Kinman, Forge Blethen. I haven't seen any more in the book, and it's just a double page spread, 7 pages 74, 75. Right, okay, Mark Carriger, apologies for messing up your surname, that's disgraceful of me. So do battalions exclude heroes on do the battalions exclude heroes on Magma Drops? There is no mention of that. The key word is simply Auric Runefather, Auric Runeson, Auric Runesmiter. It's referenced in the keyword singular. There is no exception to say that you cannot be on a Magma Drop. So I'm taking it as no, they don't exclude it. And it would be crazy if they did, because that means none of the battalions would apply to your Magma Drops, which makes no sense when you put that in conjunction with Lofnir, for instance, which is meant to be a Magma Drop heavy army. Crikey, let's have a quick look at the Runefather. Let's focus on the Runefather. We'll talk about that a little bit. Runeson, interesting stuff around the Wormslayer Javelin. I'm going to cover those 2 pages, but then I'll, forgive me, but we'll skip through the rest of the units. Not ignoring them, I mean, I'll just skip through them and pick out bits that I found interesting. Right, okay, so Runefather. What are we going to notice about Magma Drops? They've gone up to 14 wounds, as I said. The move mechanic has pretty much remained the same. Bravery is 8, save is a 4-up. I was hoping for a 3-up, but, I can live with it because now there's plenty of mechanics in there to help us with that save. Including, for instance, within one of those, the ability to do ignore wounds. As I said, throwing axes are 5s and 5s. Roaring Fire Stream has gone down to 12-inch. The mechanic is essentially the same. You roll a dice, with the amount here. So it's a d6 until you take more wounds, and then you're rolling multiples. If you get the dice below, then you are doing d3 mortal wounds. If you are within 6 inches now, not 5 inches, then you are doing d6 mortal wounds. I like it. It feels, strangely enough now, it's more about combat and pre-charge. You can soften them up, but softening them up is always dangerous on a 12-inch shooting attack, because chances are, if your opponent knows what they're doing, they're going to lengthen your charge. And you only got to take an inch off to make that charge, relatively more difficult to get off. But in combat, it feels powerful. We've got a new attack. We've got the Blazing Maw. It's kind of interesting, but it's 50-50. It's 4 to hits, 2 to wound. So, okay, 50% of the chance. You can pull it through if you can get reroll hits or something like that. But remember, those command abilities, as you said, don't apply to mounts. Thank you very much for that, David Ellis. 2s to wound, though. -2 rend, which is promising. It does D3 damage. But you can do +1 damage, so it's D3 +1. Could be, oh wait, can you, can't you? We'll have to think about that. You can definitely do that with prayers, so I don't think that would account, that would apply to the mount as well. As I mentioned, I've talked about the latch key. I think 2 things needed to happen to the latch key, really. I needed to see a better to hit, I needed to see more attacks, and I needed to see a better rend. All of those things are achievable either through prayers and abilities, but it's not on the stat line. And I think that's the important bit I'm trying to say about this army is there's a lot you can do with it, but you're going to have to plan it, and you're going to think about position, and you're going to have to think about whether you can get that prayer off and whereabouts it's going to be. You also have to hedge your bets that none of those things are guaranteed. They're not an ability just sat there on the war scroll. They are somewhere else within the army as a synergy. I like that. I think FyreSlayers are going to be more complex to play, which is no bad thing. I think they're going to be more enjoyable because you're going to see you've got to bring more variation on your units to get some of the synergies. I think there's a dark side to this, by the way, which I have to say, when I read the book, I'm going to, I think I want to talk about it, because I do think there's something within how they've shifted points and how they've shifted abilities that I'm a little bit cynical that, essentially everybody owns everything but vast quantities of half guard, and this book highly encourages you to go out and buy a lot of half guard. Now, they're a business, so of course there's a commercial aspect to the rules. Okay, moving on. Lashing Tail at the end of the combat phase. Roll a dice for each enemy within 3 inch. If the roll is less than the number of models, D3 mortal wounds. Nothing really big shifted down in there. Stare Down pretty much does pretty much the same thing. Weapon Breaker, I've talked about the mechanic changing, which is great. Steadfast Advance has changed. You use the command ability at the start of your hero phase. If you do so, pick a friendly model with this command ability until the start of your next hero phase. Do not take battle shock tests for friendly FyreSlayer units while they are wholly within 18 inch. So that's shrunk a little bit. I'm sure it was a broader range than that. I do have the book open, but I'll not go there. I think it's neither here nor there. It's not that significant. Mark is saying Lords of the Lodge only said Auric Runefather, not on Magma Drops. Lords of the Lodge. Yes, sorry, I agree with you. It does say Auric Runefather, but it's a keyword, and the Runefather on Magma Drops, as you see, has the Auric Runefather keyword just right on the bottom of the page there. So Auric Runefather. So for me, that makes sense, and it's a reference. Right, let's quickly jump through the War Scrolls and talk about some of the changes. I'm not going to cover everything. Wormslayer Javelins, it's kind of interesting now. You're adding 2 to damage characteristics for attacks made with this Wormslayer Javelin that target a monster. The good news is that's both in combat and throwing. Range is 12 inch. Your 4s to hits, your 3s to wound. It's a -1 rend. It's D3 damage, so now it's D3 plus 2 against monsters. If you get into combat with that, it's just 1 attack, 3s to hits, 3s to wound, -1 rend, 1 damage. But again, at least against monsters, you got a chance of doing 3 damage. But of course, with these things, it's if you've stuck them on a Magma Drop, it's all about the Magma Drop. It's about the Horns and Claws. It's about the Blazing Maw getting off another D3 damage, and it's about the answer. For me, a lot of the sculpting I've done, if I can show this. I've been working on my is this going to work? Yeah, maybe. As you can see, I decided the Ancestral War Axe, I wasn't happy enough with it being a curly throwing axe, which is what it looks like as far as the model's concerned. So I've created my own little mini sort of Grand Latchkeys Ancestral War Axe, which feels more appropriate for the stat, to be honest. So I've done that both for the riding one, and I've recently been working on simultaneously taking him as a Runefather on foot. I'll be doing a little bit of a chat later in the week probably about that, or definitely next week, about some of the modifications I've made to my army to bring them, I think, up to date with the book, if you like, or to take some of the benefits from the book. Right, what else have we got in there? Vying for Glory, you can reroll hits for attacks made by this model if there are any other Rune Suns within 6 inch. Remember what I was saying about stacking 2 of these guys, 2 or 3 of these guys side by side, particularly in the Lofnir. Rune Smiter on Magma Drop. We've talked about Runic Empowerment being a prayer now. You can add 1 to save rolls for attacking friendly FyreSlayer units wholly within 12 inch. This is a Ritual of Awakening on a once per battle. I like it. Again, think about 4 or 5 of these Magma Drops charging in side by side. And now they're on a +1 save. The rest sits around pretty much as you'd expect. You've still got the choice, if you like, between the Runic Iron and taking the key. The Runic Iron has gone up to 2 attacks, 3s and 4s, doing 1 damage. It makes you think a little bit about it now that the standard ability has gone up to 12 inch. And if your intention is to deploy this as a 12 inch bubble unit or a 6 inch bubble unit with more Magma Drops, personally, you'd be half tempted to just stick the Runic Iron in there as well. Just to give more attacks when you finally get into combat. The Latch Axe is still 1 attack, but that's not what it's about, so get over it, Phil. Worth mentioning that Full Grimnir and the Chosen Axes have moved from 140 points. You had to take them together, 100 points and 40 points. They've moved to just a single entry in the book now at 200 points. So got up. Have the rules changed? I don't know. I'm not going to go there for the sake of this one unless someone's desperate to know about it. Right, Runefather. We've covered Rune Sun. Let's talk a little bit about the Battlesmith. So what is the Battlesmith? We've got none shall defile the icon again, so you plant it, you can't retreat, you have to remain there. The only move you can make is a pile-in move, but if you do so, you can re-roll hits and wound rolls for the attack. You surround the Battlesmith, as I said, by half-guard berserkers. That's pretty damn interesting, you know. Bear in mind that everything is sitting on, you know, the battle line is sitting on 2 wounds now. Your characters are generally, Runefather's gone up to 6 wounds. And I'm sure he was only 5 before. Rune Sun's Battlesmiths sitting at 5 wounds. The Rune Master, interestingly enough, is pretty tough at 6 wounds. He's got some interesting stuff going off. The Volcanic Core at the start of your hero phase, you can chant a prayer. If you do so, make a prayer by rolling a dice. On a 3-up, it goes off. If it's answered, pick a terrain feature within 18 inches of the model. Roll a dice for each model within 1 inch of the feature. And for each roll of 6, that model suffers 1 mortal wound. In addition to, in addition until your next hero phase, the terrain feature becomes deadly. I like that. I like that. You know, if someone's camped a fairly big unit across a terrain feature, have some fun with that. Right, what else have we got in there? I'll tell you what, we've got Grimwrath Berserker and the Doomseeker, both covered, I think, heavily on the community channel, or at least talked about. It's nice, basically. Battle Fury is in there. So, you know, on a 2+, you make a pile-in move with this model, and then you can attack with all the weapons it's armed with. So that's at the end of combat, so you get that extra round of attack. Dead but not defeated is in there. And like I say, when you actually push this guy up to 5 attacks, or you know, you can attack twice. And what was the actual? I've got to be careful here. What have we got here? This is Battlesmiths. Where were we? Sorry about this, folks. Looking for the ones with the Rune Grimwrath Berserkers. So you can inflict 2 hits instead of 1, so every hit becomes 2 hits. So, you know, on a 3-up, you're doubling those up. That makes it 2 damage with -2 rend. That's an interesting unit in its own right, and I can see a few Grimwrath Berserkers belonging in my army. I'm really fickle about taking 2 models of exactly the same. That's the existing Grimwrath Berserker. You can't see him very well, but you get the general idea. I've converted a nice little alternative Grimwrath Berserker out of a spare model, which, you know, you generally get a few through the through all the Magma Drops and all the rest. Rune Smiter, Magmic Tunneling. I think we need to talk about Magmic Tunneling. There's no avoiding it, really. 2 big changes. You're setting up 2 new units now. It's not 1 drop, it's 2 drops. It's very specific. You drop the Rune Smiter into the Magmic Tunnel. You then subsequently deploy a 2nd unit into the Magmic Tunnel to accompany the Rune Smiter. You are still limited to 1 model. There's a few more restrictions now, for want of a better word. You've got to be more than 9 inches away from enemy units. Yep, got that. When you set up, the unit is joined. This model, that it's got to be wholly, the unit has got to be wholly within 12 inch of the Smiter. You know, I think that's kind of the point. I think it's you've got to be a tighter bubble. You know, bringing a unit of 30 along with a Smiter now is quite problematic, if you ask me. At the very least, you're going to be ending up quite tight packed. That's going to limit that charge and pile in, you know. But there are a few things you can do along the way with that. Volkite Berserkers, let's get there. Yes, the most significant point increase. Just quickly going through this, double checking. Yes, they moved from 120 to 160, so this is a, you know, 40-point increase. Yes, they've lost the Berserk Fury as it was, so ignoring wounds. Yes, they've gained 2 wounds, and like I say, statistically that kind of balanced out, so I get that. The Carl just gets an extra attack now, not the double damage. Horn of Grimnir for me was probably the most significant one. You can put 1 of these in for every 5 now, so basically you can scatter them everywhere, and I know that matches what's in the box, so I'm cool with that. But all it does is add 1 to charge rolls. This is not re-rolling that dice. That was so powerful when you were 9 inches away. For me, that and the whole restriction around Magmic Tunneling pretty much probably shuts, you know, I don't know, maybe as a late game objective grabber, but for me it kind of shut it down as that first strike mechanic. You've got to be looking elsewhere to achieve that, and there are ways of doing that. You know, the run, charge, the move, run and charge mechanic is in there, and there are various ways of achieving that. Ah, right. Who's the big gain? Well, the big boon, if you like, is Half-Guard Berserkers. What am I talking about? The Berserker Broadaxe and Flame Strike Poleaxe is a range of 2-inch, 2 attacks, 3s to hits, 3s to wound. Let's just cover the Broadaxe for a minute. -1 rend 2 damage. Yes, we're familiar with this, but you've seen what we can do with these guys with some of the other synergies. I've talked briefly about them. Duty unto death. Then you roll a dice each time. Add 2 to the roll if there's a friendly FyreSlayer hero within 10 inch of the unit, and on the 6 up, the wound is ignored. So this is still giving. This is the only unit in the army, I think. Yes, it's the only unit within the army that has retained, you know, the ignore. The Berserk Fury has now become duty unto death. It's the only rule that's remained. The Smouldering Braziers, it's based on an unmodified hit roll of the attack. If you get a 6, inflicts 2 mortal wounds on the target in addition to any normal damage. I like that. And the reason I like it is because a unit of 10 is actually getting 20 attacks. You are going to pull off some 6s on those hit rolls. So you're going to dish out a few mortal wounds. I'm quite happy with that. I think this is the thing. What we're seeing representative in this is Half-Guard Berserkers is there's definitely a shift away from large Volkite Berserker units to, I would say, there's the potential for large Half-Guard Berserkers. It's expensive on points. You're looking at something like there's a bonus for taking the last 5. So when you get it up to 30, you pretty much get the last 5 models for free. No, you do get the last 5 models for free. So it's the same price to take 25 of these as it is 30. You know, you're talking what? That's 150 quid for the unit, and you know, it's not crazy because that's a big unit, but it's also a lot of money, and given what we've kind of been talking about, that's a big unit to maneuver around, given things like the prayers and the holy withins and those kind of things. I actually think probably the sweet spot is somewhere between 15 and 20 Half-Guard Berserkers multiple unit. I suppose what I'm saying is I'd almost rather take 3 15-man units than 1 30-man unit, and you know, and you know, something like that. You know, it seems to make more sense to me. Bear in mind that they are battle line when your Runefather's in charge, so that it can be done that way. They're not cheap in terms of points, but they are incredibly effective. I mean, the truth is, if you've got a 4-up ignore wrapped around a bubble of being 10 inches within a hero, which is more than achievable, and it's not wholly within, by the way, it's just the hero's got to be within 10 inch of the unit, so that unit hasn't got to be wholly within 10 inch of the unit, it just is within 10 inch of the hero. Then you have got now, well, let's take the 20-man unit. You've got a 40 wound. Can't believe I'm saying this. Even at 20, you've got a 40 wound unit with a 5-up save and a 4-up ignore, which is never shifts. Right down to the last guy, it remains at 4-up as long as that hero is within 10 inch. And let's face it, with Magma Drops being a bit more viable, you've got heroes that are also quite quick now. You know, they can get around the table if you need to be, and a little bit more hardy to last around to the end of the battle. You get 3 of those units doing that whole front line. It's not that hard to get that bonus just from 1 hero between them in the reality. So it's a big heavy shift to Half-Guard Berserkers. I hope, though, that the mechanic around the prayers and those abilities around heroes means we don't just see these big wedges of Half-Guard Berserkers, you know, in the scene, but they just seem a little bit too good to be true. Just take it to that 30 unit example. This is 60 wounds now with a 4-up ignore and a 5-up save. Just ouch, you know, ouch. Volkite Berserkers, and this is the interesting thing, is have gone up so significantly in price. You know, we've seen a 40-point increase for a mechanic, for a move from an ignore wound to a 2 wound, a limitation around the Horn of Grimnir. Yeah, you know, this is definitely pushing people away from their established collection into, you know, to get the new units. Fortunately, I tend to build my armies based stylistically. So I actually have Half-Guard Berserkers. I have Auric Half-Guard. I only had 1 unit of 30 Volkite Berserkers, so it's not the end of the world for me. I hadn't built my army around 3 units of 30 and those kind of things, you know. So I'm actually in a position where probably for an extra 2 boxes of half guard or 3 boxes of half guard, I can pretty much have a unit of 20 of every of what they call now the core battle line, or the core units, which is around half guard berserkers, auric half guard, and Volkite berserkers. Saying that, I can't remember in any instance where auric half guard become battle line, and I will check that. Just 2 seconds. Sorry. Auric half guard. Come on. Oh, battle line. If the general is a rune master. So, sorry, you can make half guard battle line. You know what? Because I hadn't given them a lot of close inspection, I hadn't really spent a lot of time looking at them. Let's just quickly, as we get towards... I'm going to round the show up and just quickly go back through the questions. So if anybody's got anything more to ask, get it into the chat now, because I'll spend the last 5 minutes on it. You've seen all of these now. For me... Molten Infusion is both the most impressive and the least likely to take to the table. The Flame Spitter is the most the most impressive, most expensive in terms of points is the Flame Spitter. It's very, very interesting. You know, this is as you've seen on the community channel, they've showed the card for this. You pick an enemy unit within 24 inch, you roll 12 dice, add 1 to the roll if there are 10 or more in the unit, add 2 to the roll if there's 20 or more. This is a 4-up mortal wound damage dealer to units of 20 or more. Nice. I can see having a lot of fun with that. The Runic Firewalls interesting. I'm a little bit confused by one of the rules, and not that I don't understand it, I just think it's a missed opportunity. You summon the wall. It's really interesting because it's a line of sight blocker. I really like that. You re-roll saves of 1s for attacks with FyreSlayer units wholly within 12 inch. That's great. You know, it acts as a barrier. The shot doesn't have to cross the terrain. You've just got to be wholly within 12 inch. Awesome. Magma Drops can walk across it as though they can fly. You know, well, it looks to be about 1 or 2 inches high. So you're losing 2, you know, if you're going to be really panicky, 3 inches of movement to go up, down, and over it, you know, which is how you're meant to measure. So you don't lose any movement to go across it. I think there was an opportunity to almost make it an impassable terrain type mechanic, you know, as in you literally have to go around this wall of flame, unless you're a Magma Drop and you can just stroll straight through it, you know. But maybe it just would have made it too powerful, because you can see people popping this down and really funneling the field. So, but, you know, either way, cute. The Molten Infusion, absolutely love the model of the 3. Yeah. What's it all about? You roll 12 dice for each unit within 3 inch at the end of its move, and on a 6-up it suffers 1 mortal wound. FyreSlayer is not affected. You're adding 1 to bravery of units within 18 inch. That's probably important now to a degree, but for me, yeah, no. It's going to dish out 2 mortal wounds to every unit that's within 3 inches of it. You know, on average, it just doesn't feel like... If there was some kind of mechanic like the Flame Spitter, where there was a way of increasing that, you know, again, if it was based, say, on the size of the unit, maybe, where you add to the roll if, you know, I don't know, if it's wading through a unit of 20 or 30, you know, or something like that, like flashing its arms around, who knows? Who knows? There you go. Can you go through all the points, please, says Mark. No. You know, Games Workshop are absolutely amazing in providing me these books as a preview, and I know there's plenty of places you can get hold of the points, but for me, when I agreed to do this, to work with Games Workshop on this, I think one of the things was to be sensitive about some of the stuff that's important, and for me, one of the reasons to buy the book, if you like, is to get a formal copy of how the point systems work. You know what, saying that though, you know what? I'm absolutely wrong with this, isn't it? Because the points are available as soon as you go up on the Battlescribe app. So I'll take it back, I suppose. I'll take it back. Let me tell you the differences, I suppose. How about that? Rune Father on Magma Drop's gone up 20 points. Rune Smiter on Magma Drop is up 60 points. A Rune Sun on Foot is up 20 points. Rune Master's up 40 points. Battlesmith is up 20 points. Doomseeker's up 20 points. Grimwrath Berserkers, Auric Halfguard, and Auric Berserkers have all gone up 20 points. Chosen Axes, as I've said, you used to get the Chosen Axes for 40 points on top of a 100-point Rune Father, for want of a better word. It's now 200 points for both of those. So, for all intents and purposes, given the Rune Father on Foot didn't shift in points, I'd say the Chosen Axes have gone up 60 points. Volkite Berserkers, as I've said, have gone up 40 points from 120 to 160. The Spitter Wall and Beast, the Spitter, Beast and Wall in that order, 60, 50, 40, something like that. So again, I don't think I'm giving anything away, because the reality is, as soon as they update the app, those things are listed publicly anyway. The reality is, the book is a great book. The fluff is amazing. You people definitely need to go out there and buy it. Is it going to be how can I say this? Is it going to be straightforward to transition from one to the other? No, I don't think so. I think it's going to take some work before you kind of like unpick where the competitiveness is in this army. You're going to have to think about hero placement a lot more than we used to. I think you could get quite lazy with FyreSlayers. You know, you knew they were just going to tank everything and sit there, and you didn't really have to think that hard. I was playing Auric Halfguard a lot more recently, so I got used to that idea of keeping that hero close by and keeping him alive and having backup heroes. So I feel like I was kind of migrating in this direction anyway. Okay, right. Last few questions quickly. Is it just 4 battalions, or is there more? I think I covered that one. Sorry, do battalions exclude heroes? I think I've covered that. I have done. Apollon 002. I believe that the average player FyreSlayers got nerfed, but for someone that can tune them, then they got a small buff, and I mean small. You know what? You get comment of the week, because I think you're absolutely spot on. If you can really, really unpick this and give it a lot of thought and think about how you use those synergies, if you're prepared to put the time into it, then yes, I think this will be you know what? The buff alone is more interesting to play. The buff in terms of competitiveness, time will tell. Flesh Eater Corpse is pretty powerful. Idol of Deepkin, powerful. Death, unstoppable. And you know, I know this is kind of around Soul Wars and stuff, but you know, I've played against some fairly competitive lists lately, and I'm thinking, oof, you know, it's not a guaranteed win, but you know, that's where the fun is, isn't it? It's not a guaranteed survive to the end of the game. Right, Mark says, please would you go back to the Vostarge Lodge ability quickly? What are the points for Halfguard? Points for Halfguard I've done, so hopefully I've covered that. The lodge. Oh, sorry. Yes, you mean the ability. If I remember rightly, you can run 6 inches in the first turn, guaranteed, so you don't have to roll for the run. There is a command ability, which means units within 12 inch. I am looking for it, by the way. There is a command ability that says, you know, if you've got units within 12 inch of the commander, they can move, run, and charge. Here we go. I showed this page, so let's pull it back up. So this is where essentially they can add 6 inch to the move characteristics of all models in that phase. So you do not make a run roll. The command ability is Berserkers and Halfguard Berserkers within 12 inch of the hero. Add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made by the hero and friendly units. That's at the start of combat. The command trait, friendly Vostok units wholly within 12 inch of the commander can start the movement phase. At the start of the movement phase, sorry, can run in the movement phase and still charge later in the same turn. I think that starting at, you know, at the start of the movement phase is interesting. It means as long as you're close at the start, you can spread out, use that run, use that charge, you know, attack on multiple fronts. Yes, you've lost it after that, but it's you know, it's, if I remember rightly, yeah, no, that's the command trait is every time. Sorry, it's the ability that's only on the first battle round. And the artifact of power at the start of battle, pick one of the bearer's melee weapons, improve the rend characteristic by 1. I think that, you know, for me, I love the Runefather model. I want to try and make him work. Taking the Grand Latchkey axe to -2 rend. Oh, thank goodness. Because it massively improves the chance of him being able to deal damage. It's so frustrating to only have 3 attacks and you hit with 2 and then wound with 1 of them, and then that just gets saved away, you know. So if anything to help with that, I really like it. I think I'm going to be playing probably 2 fronts. I'm going to be playing both Vostarg games for a general build, And I'm definitely going to have fun with Lofnir because I've got Magma Drops coming out my ears. You know, I've got 7 of them. Yes, yes, yes. And I can only use 5. I know that. But, Magma Drops. So I'm pretty excited about that. Okay, can you go through all the points? I did that, which I normally don't, but you know, someone did point out on the last show, as soon as the book goes live, everybody gets it anyway through the Battle Scribe tool or whatever it's called, the War Scroll Builder. So good point. The points are available. Just curious, what's the max unit size plus points for Half-Guard Berserkers? They've gone up to 30 for Half-Guard Berserkers. And me and some guys are working out if they can survive buffed new Scarbrand. Okay, so there's 30 of them. You're talking 60 wounds on a 5-up save with a 4-up ignore if you stick a hero in the middle of that lot. Well, within 10 inch. You do the math, David, and do me a favour, pop along to Wargamer Online community and put a comment in there and tell me whether a unit of 30 of these bad boys can indeed survive a super buff Scarbrand. Okay, hopefully you've enjoyed today's show. Thank you very much for everybody coming along. I'm a little bit over time now, so I'm slightly worried that it says I've only been live 16 minutes, but I'm pretty certain I've been alive a lot longer than that, and I've had comments throughout the show, so I hope I'm still streaming. Good night, all. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm away for the rest of this week now. I'm travelling on business, so I'm not going to be around, unfortunately. But what you might see from me as soon as I get back is a bit of a group chat and talk about some of the stuff I've been doing to my models. Like, for instance, I have, you know, out of a spare Rune Smiter, is not going to show, maybe managed to sculpt a new Doomseeker. Because, again, I'm trying to create difference, if you like. So I have the Doomseeker model. I've made a little Doomseeker out of little bits hacked together using the spare Rune Smiter from a Magma Drop. Things like that. We'll have a little chat about what I've been doing to try and, you know, create some variants around these heroes. I don't want to see 4 Doomseekers or identical models stood in a row, so I always like to kind of chop and change and replace the models. That's it. I'm done. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. All of that crazy nonsense that we have to do on social media. Pop along to Wargamer Online community on Facebook. And if you've not been to the website and the included forum, check wargameronline.com out. There's a whole bunch of stuff going off at the forum. Check it out. There's also premium membership. So if you want to support this channel, it's done by subscribing to a premium membership on the website. It's only $2.99 a month. See you later, everyone. Thank you very much for joining me. Bye. Oh, I've got to press a button. And I can't get to